Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Art of Protection, where the author and I discuss all things relating to close protection, utilising designated, incidental, and counterintelligence. In this episode, I asked Michael about a number of sporadic topics, including briefings, handovers, and debriefings, security reconnaissance, providing body cover and physical intervention, and more. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi, Michael. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
So, what are the most common mistakes that teams make during each stage of briefings, handovers, and debriefings?
Well, on the training, I think training in real life is difficult to sort of amalgamate because they are two different things. During the training, what we expect them to do is make the mistake of understanding what the differences are between each of them. So, operational briefing is to include daily movements and a multitude of other things. I'm not sure there's value in going through it now, but the handovers is completely different because a handover is essentially explaining to whoever's taken over your position for the day or for the next working period what has happened during the last working period, new intelligence, and any other sort of pieces of information that would benefit the operation as a whole. And the debrief happens before that, actually. So it's the other way around, which is a bit annoying because you can't really delineate like in a book or in a training course. But chronologically speaking, it's operational briefing, which happens before any operation takes place. So in theory, every day. And then at the end of that operational period, there'll be a debrief, and then there'll be a handover to the next team, the team or the operatives who are taken over. So the debrief is essentially like a reflection on what happened throughout the working period. So what went well, what went bad, and what could be improved, and if there are any oversight items to take care of. So it's understanding, I think, the differences between those three different sort of headings: operational briefing, beginning of the day, what's going on, daily movements, intelligence for the last working period from the handover that the new team aren't aware of, all those kinds of stuff. Delegation of roles and responsibilities. Debrief, again, like I just said, it's a sort of combination of looking back on the day and saying what went well, what badly, and what improvements can be made, and all the rest of it. And the handover is kind of all of that, but for the next team who have no knowledge of what's happened throughout the day. But really, it's going to have to be truncated down a little bit, and to some extent, try to give them information that they need to be privy to in order for them to move forward with their working day.
It's a very important role, really, then.
It's an important part of the task, and if it's an ongoing sort of protection effort, then it's something that needs to be implemented correctly. Like I said, I think understanding the key mistakes are not understanding what they are. So we actually deliberately kind of set the learners up to make that mistake so they do definitively learn the differences.
And how do you recommend adapting these for high pressure situations or rapidly changing environments?
Yeah, it's going to depend on so many different factors. It's hard to kind of address that question properly, but I'll just give you a couple of examples for context. If there is a high threat level situation, the way in order to sort of dynamically implement countermeasures effectively would be to understand the threat and update new information, using updated intelligence, using something called designated intelligence, which I think we're going to cover on another time. Designated intelligence and incidental intelligence. And that information is really the sort of arguably the best propagator to updating the rest of the team members, and potentially the principal themselves, actually, if they feel like they need to know, or the team decides that they do need to know, for whatever reason that is. The short answer is just a continuous effort of acquiring relevant intelligence.
And can you share any experiences in your career where maybe a debrief has gone wrong or it's affected a situation, like the important role of a debrief or a handover, where it's failed, really? Failed, sorry, not failed. Where I found that word.
Yeah, where did you fail? I know. To be honest, I can't think of a specific example. I know I've had experience with bad operatives handing over. So there's something called residential security, or RST, or just residential security. And that's where a team are delegated to protect a property, whether it's just access control, essentially identifying everyone that comes in and out and ensuring it remains sterile. But I have seen on a couple of occasions where handovers haven't happened in terms of, people coming to the property or the residence or office even sometimes, and the person doesn't know who they are, and then there's a big argument with the person coming in because they've been in and out all day, and next thing you know, the new operative has no knowledge of who they are, and because they don't have a pass, and the other operative or the other team let them in, it was fine. So that things like that, I think that short example would be, knowing who's who and knowing who's had access previously and who should be given access, rather than just expecting the new team to somehow know. So that's the only real experience I can honestly give. But I bet there'd be a multitude of others. I'm sure people kind of have their own experiences.
And what lessons would you say was learned from that?
I think just personal experience. I mean, I'm emphasizing a proper handover. That really, properly handed over to the next team. There should be a checklist. I'm a massive fan of checklists.
Yeah.
They ensure nothing's left uncovered. And even if there was a mistake, that's the whole point of a debrief and a handover, is because if there's a mistake made as part of the protection effort, as part of, a checklist to ensure that mistakes aren't made, you improve the checklist. So it's like this continuous cycle of improvement. But yeah, just in answer to your question, run through a checklist rather than thinking you know everything, because on occasions you don't. And honestly, even checklists, I'll look at checklists sometimes from time to time. It's tempting not to, but just make it part of the standard operating procedure. Just have to abide by the checklist. We have checklists. One of our brands, we have checklists, and people can't actually submit their invoices until they've gone through the checklist on site. So we know that all the equipment's been properly checked. The operation's been executed properly, and the operatives now know that it's going to be problematic for them if they haven't done it. It's not because they won't be paid or anything. It's just to ensure that all procedures, regardless of how many bug sweeps or whatever it is that they do, it ensures that they are done as properly and as sort of frequently as possible, and to ensure continuity.
And how can you ensure that, let's say, the person that delivers the debrief, the leader, how can you ensure that people are actually going to contribute to the debrief rather than just seeing it as like a formality?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it really depends on the team leader implementing the standard operating procedures. If the team leader isn't emphasizing the rules and the policies and everything else, then people will ignore them. I think to some extent it's human nature, isn't it? Just make work easier. But professionals will do what they have to do, and they'll have no excuse if they don't, I don't think. So it's just, again, I think it's just a HR thing. If you get a good team, good people, good operatives, it will work.
And what tools, personally, do you think is best for delivering it? So physical, digital, and what have you found most effective?
So on the training programs, we have to use the physical ones. So we have to use printouts. The digital, we print them out, obviously. And then they have to write it by hand. And the only reason for that is because we need to prove to the awarding body or whoever checks the work and then provides the certification for qualification at the end of the training program knows that person actually did it. But realistically, I would always advise that it's done digitally. But when it is done digitally, it needs to be a secure digital environment, i.e. safe from any exploitations such as hacking or anything like that. The reason is because if you lose something physical, you're not going to be able to get it back. Whereas if you lose something digitally, arguably if there's a trace of it somewhere, or if you do it on a cloud-based platform that is secure, you can't lose it. If your laptop breaks down or the desktop reviewers break down, it's going to remain there.
Yeah.
I can do a piece of work on this computer here, go home or fly halfway across the world, open my laptop up, and because it's in the cloud, it's there. So I would strongly advise people not to use digital, a big one, tangible copies, because they're going to get lost. If it's also digital, the reality is everything's digital now. If you're going to take a photograph on your phone, you transfer it onto whatever sort of application you use to type up your reports. So again, that can be incorporated into whatever it is you're writing, and therefore I think digital is the way forward, and it makes more sense. And I think it's more secure.
That's a problem, because I like writing things down.
Yeah, that's a problem for a lot of people. There's a couple of solutions to that. One of which is there's something that I've seen it advertised on Feedback.
You can scan your writing and it goes into your phone.
Well,
but it's still me checking my phone. My phone is non-stop 24/7, so I get so distracted.
Well, my sister works for the company, for the Vanquish group as well, and she does everything by pen and paper. I always say that it's just a terrible idea, because if you misplace it, or you take it home and one of the kids take it out or whatever, throw it away, wherever happens. And it's not sensitive information. It's not people's data, by the way. It's more to do with numbers and figures. if it's gone, it's gone. You lost it. Now that could have been a week's worth of work. Now we've got no way to get it back. So there's something called, I think it's called Rewrite, and it's like a tablet, and you can write, and it accesses things like Google Drive and all these other platforms that are cloud-based, and therefore you could just write it and digitalize it, and then it goes into the cloud straight away, so you're not going to lose it. And if you're someone that prefers to actually write, then there you go, it's done.
Yeah, perfect. So moving on as well, I'm going to switch on the topic that you talk about in the book. It's called security. You're going to have to help me in the pronunciation of this.
What does it begin with?
Reconnaissance. Reconnaissance.
Yeah.
So explain, like, where does the word reconnaissance, what does it even mean, security reconnaissance?
There you go, you said it right. Yeah, no, it's reconnaissance. It's a French word, and it means to research.
Okay.
It's something that we use on a regular basis. The British, call it recce's. So did Australia. I think the Australians call it. There's someone in the sort of Western world. The Americans definitively call it recon. British call it recce's, and I can't remember if the Canadians call it recon as well. And the Australians also call it recce's. So do the Kiwis and everything else. But anyway, recce's are essentially research. So to give it some a change of context, when we do surveillance reconnaissance, obviously it's all done undercover. So we would research an environment where an operation is going to take place so as to be able to determine where operatives should be placed, safe entrances and exits if it's a building, or even if it's a road setting, we need to make sure that the mobile units can leave and enter, then leave and quickly if they need to. We also look for, when it's surveillance reconnaissance, we also look for things that may compromise the operation. Mm-hmm. So it could be things like, it could be, it's hard, I can't try and think of some now. It could be like there's building works taking place nearby, and therefore the workforce that are doing the building works, whether it's construction or road works, whatever it is, they may be sort of more aware of your presence than the person or the building you're covertly monitoring would be. And so that could be disruptive, because they might call the police, because honestly, someone sitting in a vehicle for probably a period of time is suspicious. Or if it's someone coming in out of the van, a surveillance van, which becomes apparent after a long period of time. I think if someone enters the back of a van and doesn't come out,
yeah,
8-10 hours, whatever it is, but yes, that comes off here. So that those are the things we look for. We also take into account visibility, weather when we can, and times and things like that. So lighting is really important. And on that basis, it has to take place realistically, or ideally, it has to take place in the same sort of day, time of the day. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
That's surveillance reconnaissance. Security reconnaissance can be done undercover as well, but it could also be done as ever, the way in which the coast protection team addressed. And I'll explain why that is. So when it comes to security reconnaissance, what they're looking for example, if it's the principals visiting a restaurant, they will be looking for the most suitable place for the principal to sit. And that could be on the principal's preference, or the preference based upon a threat assessment, so on and so forth. It could be that they need to find a safe room within the building. They need to find, it might be that they need to find entrances and exits of the building so as to where the vehicles, they might have 2 different parking positions for 2 different vehicles, so they can sort of dynamically assess which one's best at the time of an incident, if an incident was to take place. So that's security reconnaissance in a nutshell. I mean, there's a lot more to it, obviously, and it would take us a long time to go through all of the elements of it. But in terms of how it's performed, because it's security reconnaissance and not covert surveillance, it can be undercover, so as to mitigate the risk of people finding out that someone famous or someone important is coming to the venue. Mm-hmm. And the bad thing with that is that will attract unnecessary attention. And if there is a serious threat against someone, then they might see that as an opportunity. Now they know a location where that person may be visiting. If it's low profile or even a high profile, it'll literally be a case of one of this code protection team, search and files party, going to the venue, doing a recce. This might be hours, days beforehand. It could also be 5 minutes, because the principal's just told them.
Yeah.
And they will have to take that time to conduct the recce. Might be 1 or 2 operatives. Ideally, they produce a report. They have time. But the idea is that the worst case scenario, when the principal arrives with the bodyguards, the people that are with them, they're called the personal escort section, they can then hand over the information. So they will say to them, right, we get the principal and sat down, and here's all the information, here's all the items I've just mentioned. So entrances and exits, and this best place for the vehicles to be positioned, and all the rest of it. But the other sort of side benefit is the sort of execution of getting the principal from the street, effectively from the vehicle into the venue as smoothly as possible. So it'll be mechanically speaking, they arrive, and if there were no search advance party, no one there to do a recce or do a handover upon arrival, then what would realistically happen is that the principal would come in and the security team would do their best to find them a seat, and it would be a bit of a mess because the principal would go to sit down, and then, if they are well known, paparazzi are outside, people are trying to come up and get photographs. Whereas if there is a team in position, they've negotiated a good place for the principal to sit, they've got the position, principal arrives, the personal escort section for a second hands over to the people that are at the venue, the SAP. They go in, they take control of the principal, proverbially speaking, and then they will go in and the principal will sit down, take their lead, and that's it. And then the handover will take place verbally, and then they leave. But if it's a high threat situation, it could be in depth enough to have the recce reports that will include photographs, drawings, building layouts, maybe satellite imagery in some cases, and that will be put into the operational briefing, and that will then prepare both the search advance party and the personal escort section, possibly even the principal, for a proper secure arrival.
And in what scenarios would you recommend over
reconnaissance, or just a recce?
Okay, avert recce.
Yeah.
And over combat recce. Despite covert. Despite its visibility, potential risk. My presentation's not great.
That's adorable.
In what scenarios would you recommend overt recce over covert recce, despite its visibility and potential risks?
The risk, I think, if the threat basically is going to dictate what happens, right?
Yeah.
If that's your question. I think if, for example, there is a serious threat, overt reconnaissance always best, because no one really needs to know the principal's coming unless the security team are high profile, in which case the security team may cause unease with the team or the venue staff. If we just keep using the restaurant example. So imagine the venue had no knowledge of this person coming.
Yeah.
An unknown individual, smartly dressed, comes with 4 or 3 smartly dressed bodyguards into a building. Or prior to that, some other people arrive who are unknown. And, if it's covert, then they'll be sat at the bar or whatever, or sat at a table. And then when the principal arrives, they will switch. All of that stuff could cause real unease. I mean, we see it during the training programs, and I've seen it in real life as well. If you don't tell the venue, then it's going to be disruptive. However, if it's such a high threat, you need to do that, then you can do it in ways and negotiate ways and use your interpersonal skills to kind of, achieve what it is, whatever it is with the staff of that venue. I think with regards to low profile, you won't really have a choice in some cases because you're going to need the venue's help.
Yeah.
If we go use the celebrity example, if you've got a celebrity coming, it's going to be disruptive, right? You're going to need the help of the venue. There's no doubt about it. If it's a venue that has security, like a club, a bar, or even a restaurant, some restaurants, have security. So in that case, you would want to employ the help of the security, of the venue security. So I think in a celebrity case, I would say go for low profile, explain to the venue manager, or politely request in.
Yeah.
And look, we have a VIP come in, they're a celebrity. They will want to know who it is. You can avoid telling them sometimes. Most of the, I never told them who it was. It does, in my view, it doesn't really matter who it is. We're just asking you, they're going to come. There will be paparazzi outside, and it's going to be a bit of a mess. So can we just, have discussion about what you can do to help us and what we can do to help you and minimize disruption to the rest of your work? And if I think you do it like that, you'll get what you want from them. Yeah, like I said, I think in some cases, if the person's out of threat, I think covert reconnaissance is better. I think what I'm trying to do is differentiate between telling the staff, if you've got the ability and the interpersonal skills to discuss with one person, the venue, the most highest ranking manager, whatever it is, we do need your help. Because what we don't want to do is come and we all start switching seats all of a sudden. No one knows who that person.
Sometimes could it be as well, though, like say there was a threat going on and you're that someone from the venue could possibly be working with them. So how do you balance that, knowing to let them know that someone's coming, but then also say if the principal needs to be anonymous?
Well, that's what I was going to get onto there. That was actually what I was going to say, because that person needs to be trusted. So I think what you're saying is, how do we trust that person that we've decided now that we're going to tell?
Yeah.
And the only real answer to that is, well, there are two real answers. One is just take a risk, which is not great when you're implementing a protection effort. Well, the second option is the background check, if you have the time. So you do a background check on the individual to see if they are connected to the organisation that's issued the threat, if you are at an advantageous state to know that. But there, like I say, these answers that I'm giving, they're starting to become prolonged and difficult to answer. And the reason for that is because there's so many in the book, what we call the multitude of impacting factors, because there are so many millions of scenarios that could occur based on the type of principle it is. Are they celebrity? Are they well known? Are they famous? Sorry, are they not famous? Are they just ultra high net worth? Who's sent the threat? Is it someone who's been known for knife attacks, or is it they use IEDs? I mean, you don't know. Is it a racial group? A racial hatred group, or whatever it is. So all of these things are going to impact how you make a decision. Or take a decision. If you've got a black principal, just give the extreme. You've got a black principal and he's been threatened by a white extremist group, and you go to a Caribbean restaurant and the manager's black, is highly unlikely that he's going to be on the side of the white extremists, right? So little silly examples like that, you could try and mitigate it. But honestly, I think the best answer is to do, if you had the time, a background check to ensure that person isn't a vulnerability.
Yeah. And can you elaborate on how leapfrogging, what you speak about, is trained for in dynamic or high pressure environments?
The concept of leapfrogging, which is a term that I think I came up with, it was just because when I'm drawing on a board, when I was doing the training courses myself, when I was delivering them myself, you can see what's going on, right? In the army, there's this kind of method of sort of defending the position or attacking the position, where you kind of caterpillar. So you go there, and then your part will go there, and then goes on and on. Right? That's called caterpilling. So the idea of leapfrogging is simply that the principal will be at a venue, but there's someone, or whoever they're with, a group perhaps, will be somewhat dynamic in the sense that they don't know where they're going next. So they're with a group, they're partying, they're at a nightclub, or they're at a restaurant because they're nice early, right? They're at a pub or they're at a restaurant, whatever it is. Then they say to you, in 10 minutes, we're going to go to, I don't know, Whiskey Mist, which used to be applied in Mayfair back in the day. What then happens is the search and advance party, whether it's one person, two people or more, will need to leave the venue, either on foot, we're using one of the vehicles, if you've got time to send the vehicle back, go to that venue, do the Reiki, speak to the venue, because it's a celebrity that you're going to need to do that anyway. If it's not a celebrity, then you'd have to do it covertly, and all of those nuances going to have to push to one side now, because they're going to be impact our answering. But when they do that, they will kind of say to the other team, the personal escort section, who are with the principal, is, we're here and, safe to proceed. Also, I didn't mention this before, one of the key roles or responsibilities, of the search and advance party, when the principal is en route to the venue, it's really important to do counter and anti-surveillance around the venue if it's a high threat situation, to ensure that it's still safe for the principal to arrive. At any point, the search and advance party can say abort arrival, or something to that effect, where the vehicle continues to drive on, or literally turns around and drives the other direction because it's no longer safe for them to arrive at that venue. But leapfrogging, again, just because I've mentioned that's one step. The next step is the principal then arrives at venue. They do that sort of handover, and then the principal will say, after this, in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, we don't like this venue, we're going to go to another venue. And then the whole procedure happens again. So it's literally catch on. You're literally leapfrogging from one place to the next.
Okay.
And then the bodyguard team, like the core bodyguard team, the personal escort section, and the principal will then arrive after, and then the whole process repeats itself. This is something that is really difficult to kind of explain to people, that can happen quite frequently. It can happen during the day, it can happen during the evening, and it happens a lot. And during the training programs, we've got scenarios where the principal will go from his office or her office to a coffee shop, and the team have to know that a coffee shop visit will only last so long. So we need to sort of understand and use our interpersonal skills to ask the client politely where they're going next.
Yeah.
And they kind of implement that leapfrogging situation. But again, it's the common sense that kind of it helps them decide how long they need to be at the venue for, before, during, and after. Because if they go to a restaurant and they're booking and they're going to eat there, then the team don't really need to worry too much about going to the next venue just yet. So I can kind of use that time to perhaps, do something else that's useful.
And what are the key skills do you recommend that these operatives must master?
Flexibility.
Yeah.
The ability to adapt, which is difficult, because if you have an expectation in your mind as to how your day's going to go, it's going to be simple. Everything's going to happen. Expect it not to happen at all, because change will happen fast with people, regardless of whether or not they're actual one of these people who are, mind changers by default, or just someone who likes to stick to a structure and a plan, but actually has to deviate from it because, who knows what's going to happen during the working day or night. Then, I think don't get too hung up on your mindset that you've been working and planning for everything you're about to do, because it will change. We actually do this because it does, believe it or not, people find it frustrating. And I can understand why. They'll plan a lot throughout the day. There's been like 2 to 3 hours planning like a 2-hour trip for the principal going from one place to another, right? So they'll plan, right, when we go to that venue, the principal said he's going to go to that venue next. So as we arrive, spend 2-3 minutes there doing a handover, then move on to the next place. So we're ready to move on as well. But then what happens is the principal comes out and literally says, oh no, I want to go to Selfridges. And you can see the look on their face, like, what? We haven't prepared for that. So dynamic thinking, common sense, and the ability to be flexible in your mindset is really, really important, whilst maintaining an effective protective effort.
Mm-hmm.
Protective effort.
Mm-hmm. And what are the most common oversights during a recce mission that can later impact success or safety?
Do you know what? You threw me a little bit. You said mission. Just say operation.
Operation, recce mission.
Yeah, what was the question?
What are the most common oversights during the recce?
Yep. What are the common oversights?
During a recce that can later impact operational success or safety. So basically, what are the most common mistakes that sometimes?
I think just missing basic things, Sometimes they won't think about getting a seat that's suitable for the principal based on the situation. What tends to happen a lot is people, and I'm only talking about training, really. It's because you see mistakes out on the ground in real life. You do. But it less so because they're professional and they've got experience.
Yeah.
If, for example, they go to a venue and there's a perfect seat by a window, beautiful view. Maybe it's in like a high-rise building and it's a beautiful view of the sea beneath it. It might be the furthest point away from the emergency exit, which is less than ideal for someone with a high threat situation. And the threat assessment suggests or implies that they need to be close to it, or for whatever reason. I'm getting into the real nuances here, but silly little things like placing someone based on what you perceive to be convenient and forgetting about the outcome of the risk of threat assessment. That happens quite a lot. The other thing that happens is silly little things, right? So what I've seen, and I learned this myself actually, is going to a venue or go to do a recce, and this is what I'm talking about really early on in my career. I used to go to, and this is probably not a great answer, but I used to go to a venue and it would be like a nightclub, whatever, and we'd be there waiting for the principal to arrive. We've got the paparazzi sorted out. We know the vehicles could be negotiated, where the vehicles in the spot, everything's perfect.
Yeah.
Get them out. Perfect handover. It looks smooth. It was professional. We get them into their sort of area in the nightclub, whatever it is, and it looks great. And they weren't stopped by any of the crowd because we were really dynamic and quick about it. And then the principal will say to you, where's the bathroom? You're like, oh, I don't know. So like the fact that you don't know where it is doesn't sort of suggest that you've really done a great recce of the venue. And they know sometimes that that's what you were there to do. So it's a silly little thing. It sounds stupid, but actually ticking off those small proverbial boxes in terms of understanding, the complete layout of the venue, understanding what they might want as well, that has nothing actually to do with security. So prioritize security, yes, but also don't forget about things like, convenience. Where can they go for a cigarette? Where can they go to as well? What's the quickest way to get out if they need to as well? But that might not be a security related thing. That might just because they want to leave now and they don't want to go out the main entrance. So all of those things, take into account the small things as well as the big, but prioritize security as always.
And how would you say that they need to prioritize the checklists? So items like I think you just touched on that anyway, like their exits, things like that.
Yeah, so there will be, I mean, in the book, and on any training program, there are checklists. We, as a company, we use checklists as well. I mean, I'm of the mindset of the black box theory, which is this concept that compares the aviation industry to the medical industry. So before I go into that, I'll just kind of answer your question briefly, and then I'll explain that methodology. With regards to checklists, we do use checklists a lot. Even during recce's, and it would be on their phones, we'll send it during their operational briefings. We'll say, look, this is the checklist. Abide by this checklist, please. Please abide by the checklist. Sometimes they won't, but on occasions, and in some of the companies, they have to. They have no choice. They actually have to tick it on an online form. When they're doing recce's and they're close protection officers and they've got a lot of experience, we rely upon their expertise and experience to pull through and conduct a proper recce. So that's, those nuances are kind of difficult to manage sometimes. But going back to this theory, which is going to be a bit of a longer answer, unfortunately, so you might try not to nod off. But the black box theory is, like I say, it's a comparison between the aviation sector or industry and the medical industry. Medical industry, I can't remember the figures because I can't retain figures in my mind very well. But there are a lot more. There are far more accidents that occur or errors that occur, human errors that occur during medical operations, and I don't know the correct terminology, to be honest. But doctors and medical professionals make a lot more mistakes than pilots do, and the reason that this theory suggests that is the case is because the black box theory, regardless of the experience of the pilots, will always rely upon checklists. So they may be flying the same aircraft every day for 30 years. However, they are, I don't know if it's a legal requirement, but they are definitely obliged by the airline's policy. And I think the aircraft manufacturer's policy to abide by the checklist. And don't forget, so in a cockpit, everything's recorded.
Yeah.
Audibly.
I'd be worried if there wasn't a checklist. The toy about to fly.
But the funny thing is, even like some of the landing checklists, right? So a landing checklist, there are more than one of them sometimes. So it might be the case that stupid things like ensuring the gears, that the landing gear, which is the wheels of the aircraft, are down, flaps are set correctly, cabin is secured. Simple things like that. It's like any pilot is going to know that. But
a lot might slip your mind because you think it's so easy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the arrogance of thinking you remember everything all the time is not allowed. And egos aside, it's like, but we go to one site, we've got a checklist, there are 4 items on it, we have to do it. Whereas, and I'm not slamming medical professionals, of course I'm not, we rely on them all the time. But there are concerns about, what they call the God complex, where obviously, every human is different. And again, there are probably so many different impacting factors that we talk about in the book and in the medical profession as well, that you can't have a checklist for every other person for a medical procedure, or maybe you can, I don't know. But there appears to be, when you compare the two industries, a massive mismatch on errors. How many aircraft crash during a month? Hardly. I mean, it's most months it's not
crazy. What I find crazy, this is a little bit off topic, but I find it crazy that people are more scared to get on a plane than to get in a car. But how many car crashes compared to plane crashes are there actually?
Exactly. Oh no, air travel is the safest way of traveling.
Yeah,
100%. But you look at going back to the doctor thing. It's because they don't have these, or they don't rely upon checklists. They just rely upon memory and expertise always to get them through it. But they comparing the numbers. How many sort of mistakes were there made throughout the airline industry, or the airline industry, I suppose it is, isn't it? The aviation industry, sorry, throughout the month compared to medical mistakes, and it's massive, it's huge. Whether it's someone as extreme as someone died as a result of neglect by a doctor or a surgeon or whatever it is, or something as a mistake where they get an infection or something. So these things happen. I think that's the reason we prefer checklists. It avoids mistakes, and we have to remind the operatives, look, it's not because we think you're incompetent. It's because we want to ensure continuity throughout all of our offices globally. Even like report writing stuff, it's like there's a checklist for them, and we can see that they haven't abided by the report writing checklist. Have you included the time in every entry? Have you included a description? Have you included, the photographs or the drawings or whatever it is? So that mitigates the likelihood of there being an error. And that's why we try to do it. With Reconnaissance, there is a checklist, but it's difficult to do that when it's dynamic and quick.
Yeah. And then we'll just briefly touch on providing body cover and physical intervention.
Yeah.
That's quite intense.
The thing is, it's a funny thing because I left it out of the book. In fact, I wrote the chapter.
Yeah.
I wrote it in its entirety, based on UK legislation. Because I'll tell you why I picked UK legislation.
Okay.
Because it's the most recent change in the security industry. In 2023, I think it was the Security Industry Authority, the SIA, changed the rules and regulations that impacted close protection trainees. So they said, right, close protection trainees now need to be physical intervention. They never used to have to do that before. So there was a massive change in the way in which courses were. That if there was an extra 5, I think it was an additional 5 days minimum at the beginning, and then they kind of reduced it down to 3 days in some cases. So, and everyone who had a close protection license in the UK, they had to go and do what they call top-up training. And that was 5 days to begin with, then they've reduced it down to 3 days, I think, if they did a certain amount of coursework at home. And then there was a balanced version, where they have 4 days in a classroom face-to-face training. Point is, all of the legislation around it changed recently in the UK. So that's why I used the UK example in the book. And I used all of the techniques and methodology that are supposed to be implemented on these programs and put it into a whole chapter. But obviously there were examples as to why it's required, and the use of force was mentioned again, and which is a repetition from the legal chapter, the law chapter. But in the end, I decided to take it out of the book and I removed the chapter entirely. And I explained it in the summary of the book why I did that. I think.
Why did you do that?
Well, that's the thing. I do know it. The reason is because I arguably I should have kept it in. When the book's released, we'll find out whether or not it was a mistake or not. But I think a book like that, any book, and any training course, arguably, that some regulators have their requirements, and that's fine. But in a 21-day training program or whatever it is, and in a book, you're not going to teach someone how to properly restrain someone. It's difficult to do it with, and no matter how many images you have. And that was the other problem. I think there was half a page of writing and then a photograph at the bottom, followed by another 3 pages of photographs trying to show people how to maneuver, to carry out a certain maneuver or whatever it is. And it just started to be like a photo book. And so I thought it's just too photograph heavy for me. I prefer theory anyway, but the other reason is, in reality, they need to practice this in a safe environment. Not that's the book, call their mate over or their missus over or their husband over, whatever it is, and practice on them. That's not, so there was that concern as well. That wasn't really a major concern, but it was a consideration. And I think the book really is, and when I wrote the subtitle of the book, which is Close Protection, Utilising, Directed and Counterintelligence. Physical intervention is something you just do later on. That's my view. It's something that you could do as part of your continuous professional development. Does it need to be in a book? I don't think so. Am I going to regret it? Maybe. Time will tell. I took the decision. It was 50-50, but then it kind of balanced in favour of not being in there because all of what we just mentioned.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not going into the next book if you do write one?
I don't think I'll ever write a close protection book again. I think my next book will be something to do with sort of more counterintelligence heavy. But yeah, no, it won't. I don't think physical intervention. It's not my speciality anyway. I think martial arts is one thing I used to practice martial arts, and I just think trying to teach someone those methods and techniques with photographs is borderline silly, honestly. It's just, I did it, and also I was getting...
But about the case you just said, how people can copy these, and if you read in a book where you're going to practice like a little bit like when you're at school and you've got a PE book and you have to copy it. I mean,
yeah.
Or like follow Joan Wicks on the TV or something.
I know, yeah. But you said that, I mean, but again, even a video would be better. So that was the other sort of thing. I thought that was the other counter argument that happened inside my head. I thought, well, maybe we could get some of the instructors doing videos and we can put a link in the book to where the videos would be. Although if they're reading the physical book, they'd have to type it out. But yeah, I just thought even that is it's a bit basic, and honestly, it's a bit patronising to certain learners because they will be so experienced in certain disciplines of martial art, or and despite all of that, if they actually go and do it, of course, they have to do it anyway in the UK, and I'm sure in other countries it's going to change as well. But yeah, it's just those reasons that I still stand by the decision now as it stands that I did take it out for the right reasons, and that's what they are.
It's okay. Well, I don't think you can regret any decision.
Can if you want to, but I think it's is what it is.
My motto is no regrets. It happens for a reason. So,
But you know,
and why do you think your next book will be more focused on counterintelligence?
because I had a plan. I started writing the series of books. The first one, Technical Surveillance Countermeasures, the Real Guide to Surveillance, and then the Close Protection. My career and my advice is really with close protection as a consultant, which is largely what I do. As a consultant, there's only so much advice you can give with close protection, or at least I thought that anyway. Then another book is like 400 plus pages, so maybe not. But it's realistic when you're dealing with a client. There's only so much they want to hear about close protection. The real strong pieces, real strong elements, sorry, I think are around counterintelligence, in my view, based on the close protection that we provide.
Yeah.
Intelligence, counterintelligence is critical. And I think that as an organization, the brands that we own are focused largely on that area. So I think that because I've done so much training and, we've got our threat research team now, and we've got, we think possibly the biggest brand in technical surveillance countermeasures, it would be probably better to kind of focus on technical surveillance countermeasures in an advanced form. Because like I said before, that book that I wrote, the first one, was kind of rushed, and it sold very, very well. It's the best-selling out of the two books. It might be the best-selling out of the three so far, who knows? But it's definitely the most successful and most recognized book that I wrote. And I think to progress on from that and to improve on that to a more advanced version would be better, both for me and for the organization, and for whoever's purchased it and attended one of the training programs in the past. I'm hoping it'll be accompanied by, it will be accompanied by another training program. Although I don't know that I'm going to deliver it. I'm hoping to retire from training in its entirety this year. So I don't think I'll be delivering them, but one of my colleagues will.
Yeah. So welcome back.
Thank you.
We're back again on the podcast. We're just going to touch basically when you talk about LUPs and ERVS.
Yeah.
ERVs, ERVS.
That's all right. It's an easy one to make.
So tell me, what does LUP stand for?
LUPs stand for layout points, which is basically the first of many sort of initialisms that give more of a sort of set of things to consider when planning a security operation. So layout points are essentially a predetermined location where the team would rest a vehicle or meet with the rest of the team, usually to sort of stop at a point whereby they need to assess whether or not it's safe for them to proceed. So what happened would be with the search advanced party, who should in theory be in position, they would send a confirmation or abort command, which depends. Some people word it differently, but ultimately it's whether or not it's safe to proceed. Yes, come, it's safe, or don't bother, it's not safe, essentially. So the layout point is usually that. So the position or the location, distance, whatever you want to call it, away from the actual arrival point or the venue is determined by the severity of the threat. If some extreme example, there's a bomb threat, then obviously it would be slightly further afield than it would be if there was no threat at all. I mean, if there's no threat at all, you probably wouldn't use a layout point. But if it was a minor threat, such as a concern about certain people in a crowd, then they would say, look, layout point will be 2 roads away. We'll make sure that the person's not there at that time. We'll continue. Another sort of side benefit of layout points, which some people utilize them for, I don't think they do, but at least the theory of it is that they can go or endeavor to get there at a certain time and leave there at a precise moment so as to ensure on a timely manner at a given destination. So if, for example, they want to arrive dead on 8 p.m. or 2000 hours, then they know that from the layout point to the venue where there's going to be no traffic, no interruption, they only need to leave 5 minutes beforehand, or so 1955 hours, drive at a certain speed via a certain route, and then they'll arrive at exactly 2000 hours, and then it looks like a smooth on-time arrival. How often that happens, honestly, I don't know. I don't think it's very often.
Yeah.
But that's another possible utilization for a layout point.
And what key factors would you consider when, say, you're in a rural area and there's not any places? Like, how do you pick an environment for a layout point?
I think it largely depends on the threat, really. Again, I think we're going to keep coming back to this, unfortunately, over the next few sort of discussions that we have, because it is all largely based on the outcome of a threat assessment, which we've only discussed at this stage. So the answer lies in what the nature of the threat is and how serious it is. The distance between the arrival location and the layout point is going to be determined by all those factors.
Yeah.
So it's hard to answer definitively for any one case, or we give examples, but I think, put it into context using the bomb example, we'll choose our distance wisely based on those elements. If it's rural, though, if it's out, if it's an open environment, if, for example, if it's in a hostile environment, then obviously you need to take into account physical cover. So you don't want the enemy to observe any, or what I suppose you want to do is kind of mitigate the likelihood of the arrival location being observed and or the convoy being observed in the first place by the enemy. So layer points one thing, but then obviously route reconnaissance needs to be taken into account as well. And actually layout pointing, ERVs and all these other things need to be discussed first before we discuss route reconnaissance, because you can't really do route reconnaissance without taking those things into account.
Yeah. And also, how do you ensure confidentiality when you're working with different teams, when you're deciding this layout point?
With regards to operatives and things like that, obviously there needs to be comprehensive checks. If it's a severe situation, then team members will be selected very, very carefully. That would all have happened in the background way before them being entrusted with something like operational planning, or even the information or the intelligence role operation that's about to take place. So I think that kind of lies in a HR sort of mechanism way before anything like that takes place.
And has there been any real life scenarios where the LUP has been compromised, and what lessons were learned from that?
In the situations that I used to work in, no, I don't think so, because I always worked in honestly sort of relatively low threat situations. I never worked in a hostile environment. I think the reality is, so layout points are only going to be compromised if they use the tool in a hostile environment, and that's if they use the tool. They would only be compromised by way of hacking or by leaking someone being paid to provide information to another. So I suppose the answer to your questions, yes, in terms of what I can provide in terms of context. That no, I've never known a situation where that has been an issue for me.
Yeah. And you talk about safe havens as well in the book. So how do you determine, this is what I wonder as well, how do you determine a safe haven? Similar to the question that I just asked, but say you're in an environment that's very rural, like how do you find these safe havens in a situation when you need to act fast?
Yeah, if it's rural, it is difficult, honestly. So it depends where you're going to and from. So the whole route needs to be taken into account. A safe haven is essentially a location that is safe. I mean, it does what it says on the tin, as it were.
Yeah.
It's got to be somewhere that's secure enough for the principal to be attracted to, in order to, to provide a secure and protected environment until, help arrives for extraction. If it is one rural location to another, then it's a difficult one to answer. It might be the case that there are none available. So if you're in a scenario where you are trying to ascertain or find a safe haven along a certain route and you can't, it might be the case that you need to make more provisions in terms of the transport security.
Yeah.
Improve the security of the vehicles, perhaps one more vehicle, maybe backup vehicles that are not necessarily part of the convoy dotted along the route somehow. That's in extreme situations. But in terms of training program, because of the nature of the work that we do, we work only really in central environments, so safe havens are pretty easy to come across.
And also, what are the main challenges involved when you're relying on public locations? So say you've got a train station that has to be your safe haven, or you've got your police station's pretty safe, but like a public environment, what are the main risks that are involved with that?
Well, so things like when we look at safe havens, theory of a train station being safe is sort of questionable, but it is listed in some of the criteria set out by some of the authorities in certain countries, not all of them. I would argue that a trade station is not a safe haven at all. I mean, it's the antithesis of a safe environment, actually, a safe haven. Sorry. So you need to look into how open it is and what actual security is there. Is it the case that it's just venue security, the high vis type security, effectively, which honestly, no disrespect, but in some cases they're not going to be of any use or any help. What you really would hope for is armed security, and that's where it kind of the argument kind of works in some people's favor, because if there is armed security there, then of course that's going to be beneficial and sufficient to argue the case that that could be a safe haven. I mean, if you are in somewhere where there's a major train station where there would be armed security, I would argue that you would probably want to look for an embassy or something, because I mean, train stations in cities are usually central, aren't they? So you're going to want to sort of look for an alternative. That's what I would say. If a train station is the only option and there is armed security, when I say armed security, I'm talking about armed police, by the way. So if there is armed police there, then yeah, that will do. It's better than nothing.
Yeah. And can you share any times where it's been successful with the safe haven or unsuccessful?
Like I say, I'll be honest with you, I'll be quite lucky not to have to work in those situations. And here's the truth, right? In reality, we have to do this in training because they need to know what it is. They need to do reconnaissance, route planning, and understand the implications of layout points, safe havens, and a multitude of other things. But in reality, time is of the essence. Insofar as there isn't much time. Sometimes budgets don't allow for such reconnaissance in the first place, and it's sometimes the case that you wouldn't necessarily need to do that anyway. Yeah. So like I say, safe havens, have I ever utilized one? Honestly, no. I've got colleagues who've found themselves in situations where they've had to, remove the principal from one part of the venue to, a sort of a manager's office or something that was slightly more isolated and secure because of the I think like a fight broke out or something in the club. I mean, silly situations like that. But no, I mean, if it's a really serious scenario and you have to extract someone from a location or from the route that they're currently on to a building that offers armed security by way of armed police, or, if it's an embassy, for example, the US embassy is one of the most secure embassies in the country, in this country at least. That would be a great option if it was a US citizen. But, it's in terms of have I ever had to use one? No. But, I've had colleagues that have, and like I say, in reality, if it's a low threat situation, you're not going to need that, and you're not going to really take it into account. Not really. I know I shouldn't say that, but it's true.
Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We hope you enjoyed that episode, and we will be back with some more questions and answers with our author, Michael Chandler, on the book, The Art of Protection.